Hello, everybody, and welcome to this first live event of the Digitally Competent Educational Organizations MOOC that is called School and Technology and Indivisible Binomial. My name is Nair Carrera, and I'm one of the moderators of this MOOC, directed by the National Institute for Educational Technologies and Teacher Training, INTEF. This MOOC is, as you probably know, is based on the European Framework for Digitally Competent Educational Organizations that has been developed by the Joint Research Center in Seville, and it has been developed by Linda Castañeda, Fernando Trujillo, and David Alvarez. So as you know, this framework presents a great variety of elements on reflection, and it works to integrate technology in schools, seeking to improve student learning somehow. And to help us go through different elements of this MOOC and also the framework, we have here with us two out of the three authors of the course, and they are Linda Castañeda and Fernando Trujillo. Welcome both, and thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, so just to give the audience a little bit of a background of both of you, Linda Castañeda holds a degree in pedagogy by the University of Murcia and a PhD in educational technology by the University of Balearic Islands. She's also an associate professor in the Department of Didactics and School Organization of the Faculty of Education at Murcia as well. And she also writes, research, and gives lectures about the impact of technology on teaching and learning processes. If you want to know more about Linda, please visit her website or follow her on Twitter with her handle Linda CQ. I think it's fine, Linda.
Yeah, that's it. Linda CQ on Twitter and everybody on the web.
Okay, and on the other side of the ring, we have Fernando Trujillo, and he holds a doctorate in English philology, and he is a university professor in the Department of Didactics of Language and Literature. He teaches at the Faculty of Education, Economics and Technology of Ceuta from the University of Granada. He has been a Deputy Dean of Research and International Relations of this faculty from the year 2000 to 2008, where he is currently head of the Department of Didactics of Language and Literature in the same faculty. He is also a founding member of Conecta 13, and he usually writes in Trujillo de Spanish. Fernando, I hope the introduction is fine for you. Please feel free to...
It's wonderberful, perfect. I was not prepared for the boxing analogy, and I haven't brought my gloves, and I'm afraid I'm in disadvantage.
Is it the right one? Is it the right analogy?
Me neither, but it's a gentleman ring, you know.
Yeah, we will use kisses and hugs instead of gloves.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, and just for the audience to know that the webinar is being recorded, so we will share it afterwards in the same page of Ducalab that people used to join today. So I think without further ado, we should start. Fernando and Linda, if you're ready.
Sure.
Go.
Okay, so first question. According to you, what do you think are the main mistakes that teachers and schools have done when trying to integrate technology into education?
That's a good one for you, Linda. And,
yeah.
Talking about mistakes of teachers and schools, go.
No, I personally believe that it's very difficult to speak about mistakes when you speak about how teachers or how the schools are trying to survive to the wave of technology or the wave to trying to get the best service or the best right of education to students. So thinking in mistakes is quite difficult and quite unfair with them. But from my point of view and with the experience from all the teachers and colleagues that are near to me, I think that the most important mistake that we are doing, that we are making, is thinking that education, technology, organization, parents, students, and learning, and so on and so on and so on, work in different manner and work differently. We can make different analysis from any part, and with the different part just together, just isolated, we can understand the entire school. And the problem is if we want to really get forward and go beyond the situation of having a small analysis of different things in the school, is trying to think globally. It's trying to integrate everything we know. So this is a big mistake that we have done. We have analyzed how the digital divide is working in the society, how the technology is impacting on our students, how technology is impacting on the teaching methods, but how they are all working together. I think this problem of isolation of the elements of analysis is the big mistake that we have done.
So it should be all together working like it's in a joint bubble or something like that, let's say.
Yes, it's more or less, it's the difference of thinking individually or thinking systematically. Understanding the education as a complex thing that is more than a systemic, because we got the system, that it works like a system. Every part is depending on the other parts. But in addition, this is a complex full of agency of people. People has its own problems, its own motivations, its own context, and all these contexts and things are including different elements to the entire situation. So if we understand everything in different in different moments or as a different independent things, we lost the real perspective of the systemic and complex thing that education is.
Yeah, but I would say perhaps that the problem is in the question. Perhaps we could rewrite the question to include, apart from teachers and schools, we should include the administration, and because even if we do not consider the problem between public and private schools, considering the administration as this umbrella that covers everything, in many cases and concerning many different aspects, we could talk more about miscoordination and misprovision of hardware and software and connections than of an adequate process of coordination statewide. For example, I wrote some time ago about how many of our educational innovations have been radical, in the sense that they were not being built from any established and common and accepted common ground or foundations, and we have inserted in the system, or we have tried to insert into the system concepts, procedures, and also equipment which we were not ready to accept. For example, we have been more focused on equipment than on competence. We didn't think of the teachers' competences, which we could use to then grow on and make it more sophisticated.
And then we find out that they have many tablets that they cannot use, or some screens that they don't know how to use.
We have had personal computers that were not used. We have had tablets, and then we will have, in next future, we will have iPads or Chromebooks, because the key questions,
reality classes,
the key questions were not asked. One tiny example of the problems concerning coordination is that we have been quite unable, or the administration has been quite unable, to create efficient networks of teachers in which they could share their experiences. And the networks, I know, at least in Spain, are horizontal, have been built by teachers by themselves on their own, and have not been promoted by the administration. And then if the administration is able to build a network, it's, at least in the case of our nation, it's region-wide, is based on regions, and we have had many problems to share experiences in a more national perspective. Fortunately, in the case of Spain, EducaLab has provided with some channels and some ways, some means to create something really similar to those networks I was talking about. But we have had enormous problems with coordination and provision of hardware, software, and connection. For me, in fact, it's more miraculous that we have been able to insert technology into school than a logical process. It's part of a miracle.
It's not a logical process, but it's not a miracle as well, neither. Because in fact, when you speak about the lack of prevision, or the lack of or the introduction almost forced of equipment or of technologies in school, the question is that are not just technologies and equipments, are also concepts that are not even provided by the administration or by the schools or by the education, are provided by I don't know, companies or from all the actors that are outside from the educational environment, and arrive into school and arrive into the language of the government even, or the language of the schools. And we decided to include it, not to implement, to include, to install in the schools without any provision of time for reflection, time and ways for reflecting about it, even for thinking in global strategies or in collective strategies for getting this into our logic and to our rationale. You know, when we think on the next innovation that must be in the education, we don't have really the real clues about who is thinking on them, because we are trying to implement everything that arrives, and we are in the school, we are trying to arrive to the last thing in the last moment, but without moment and without time for reflecting together about what is our plan, if we have any.
Yeah, because in fact, and that's one point that the DirectoINTEF framework is coming to solve. We have used the model of Sherpas helping us climb the Himalaya or the Everest or any other high peak, and than a collective, common, shared model of introduction of innovation or technology. We have been led by Sherpas, who were teachers willing to use technology or to implement any type of innovation. Because a curious fact about the school, at least in Spain, is that if you put on one side people who are using technology and then put on the other side people who are designing projects or using gamification or any other type of innovation, in fact they are the same people. They are not two different sets of people, and they are the Sherpas. And we didn't have that logical, common, collective, socialized model of to introduce technology in our schools. My hope is that the framework can help us do what you were telling us, think about the logical process of introduction of technology in the school.
Or at least creating the mechanisms.
First, to have the concepts. I mean, have a look at these blocks of ideas, then the mechanisms, then the processes, the political strategies, and so on. I think that's one of the good things of the framework.
And then what happens when the administration, for instance, has other priorities, let's say, or they don't focus as much in technology as we wish, for instance?
But the question is not if I start, but the question is not if this is a priority if technology is a priority for the administration. The question is for whom education is the priority. Sure. So the education must be the priority for at least for educators and at least for the schools. So administration can give us ways and things, and we have to force them to give us these spaces for creating this. But we have to take into account that the most important thing for us is education, and education today is for a world with technologies. The world without technology is a science fiction world. So if we want to, if the basic education in any part of the world, if you ask for anybody in the world what is basic education for, They say, for preparing people for living in the world. This has many meanings, but this big meaning implies a world, and this world is web technology. So even if the technology is not a priority for the administration, it must be a kind of the transversal thing.
And take into account in order to, let's say, create all the policies. Okay, great. Thank you. I have other question.
Okay.
So the DIGCOM framework of citizen competence has been through many years of development and implementation in all the different areas, including also the educational sphere. So to what extent do you, Fernando or Linda, think that this new framework can help us to integrate technology in the classroom?
Okay, just to be coherent with what I've just mentioned, for me the framework first can help us consider all the relevant aspects of the digital implementation in educational context, and not only schools, but any type of formal or informal educational setting. But then once you consider all those relevant aspects which can be improved and can be expanded, but in the framework you have at least those topics you should consider, it can help us, we could say, face the implementation. It can help us have a clear layout of the different steps of the process. For example, when we started the project in Spain, the project Escuela 2.0, School 2.0, we didn't have a clear layout of the phases we had to cover until technology was to be used in a classroom, in a maths classroom, in a science classroom. And then, apart from this fact of having all the relevant aspects into consideration and having a clear facing of the process ahead, I think that the framework can help us move from the political and organizational aspects of the digital competence, competence in organizations, to the more pedagogical aspects. I think that for many years in school we have lived in a sort of false, fake image that schools were concerned with curriculum, were concerned with pedagogy, and that political decisions and all those decisions taken by the stakeholders in their offices were not relevant to us. And I think that the framework makes a good move from the political and organizational to the pedagogical. And that is important if we don't want to put the blame on teachers and schools when things are not working, as somehow the first question was trying to imply. The blame is to be put on all of us, on society as a whole, which is not giving teachers and schools on many occasions the tools to work with. And then finally, I think that inserting this idea of professional competence, of professional development into this political and social and organizational context is really helpful. It makes us aware that our own competence and development are social concepts, not individual concepts in itself. On many occasions, we restrict competence to an individual layer, and that's at least unfair for the individual. Competence is a social concept. Sorry, it's not just individual. And I feel that the framework, which is under continuous revision, I think that this actual version of the framework really pictures this idea of social and political development of the digital competence. And for me, it's one of the big points in this new version, in this new document, I think.
Indeed. Yeah,
I
go
agree
ahead.
with you. I definitely agree with you. And I understand. And there is one thing that you have comment, at least you say competence is a social thing,
Sure.
and is a situated thing. When you speak about competence, you have to speak about context. So until now, or until this moment, not this framework, there are many frameworks, other frameworks at least, but in this, with this perspective, use European big perspective as this BICOM-OREC framework is. This is the first one. That understand that the organization is an important thing in schools as well. And it doesn't speak about schools as enterprises, as companies. And this is wonderful, because for the first time, we speak about the importance of the organization, what is important in the organization, how everything in schools is related to the organization, to the importance of being a system that works and so on, and how this is the only way for being efficient and being good, but without speaking of schools as companies. And also, this framework understands that if we are competent in this context, with these conditions. If we don't have these conditions, it's another moment, it's another competence, and it's another thing. So I definitely agree with my colleague. I think the social perspective, the political perspective as well, but the organizational perspective is important. Even more, from the pedagogical point of view, when we speak about technology, almost always, we speak very much about resources, we speak very much about methodologies and didactics and strategies of classrooms, but we speak very few things about how the school as organization works, and how the big institution must be touched in everything, and how we as components of those organizations can touch into this component. And we left the institutions as if the institutions weren't responsible of being competent. And when we start speaking about this framework, we start speaking about the competency of the institutions in a world full of discourses about the collective things and the intelligence of the crowds and so on, speaking about institutions as just the Zoom of many people working together, not with them, but in the same place, just only this. This is completely out of the time. It's not realistic, and it's not. It doesn't help for the future.
Let's put two examples. I was thinking this morning, having coffee with my colleagues at the faculty, about banking and banks, and about how banks are making us use technology to interact with them, and they are trying to make it more expensive to go to the bank office than using an interface, a digital interface, to use all the banking resources. So when teachers get used to use banking digital interfaces, they will be prepared. They will have the competence to use pedagogical digital resources. So competence is social, and these years we have been living at school. We have been trying to develop in teachers a digital competence which was not being required in many other situations in their everyday life. The common thing 5 years ago was to go to your bank office and to ask for a loan and have your everything. This is changing dramatically, in many senses, because we could consider the relationship between age and use of digital resources and so on. But banks are making us forcefully more competent than we were 5 years ago. So, to consider the competence just an educational or professional concept or set of skills is not to be aware of the pervasive existence of technology in society. And then, for me, it's been very curious, and I've talked to many principals and head teachers at schools, that we were trying to use technology in the classroom, but we were really reluctant to use technology to work with our colleagues in the same school. So we wanted to use Google Drive with our students, but we didn't want to use Google Drive to plan a lesson among 2-3 teachers and to integrate the curriculum.
Definitely.
Well, now, I think that now we have rediscovered technology to work among teachers and to share information, and we are somehow on the road to use technology to this backstage moment, in this backstage moment, planning our lessons and so on. But it is an easy proof of how everything has not been well planned. We tried a flipped learning before being able to make a hangout with a colleague when we were at home, for example.
Well,
Yeah.
there is an example that is very evident, at least in Spain, is very evident. One thing that has happened at least in the last decade. This framework answers very well to a realistic thing, one thing that is very evident in the reality. 10 years ago, many good friends of us were starting, some of them were innovating in their classrooms, and they were working in their classroom with a lot of technology. They were the pioneers. They were working, they were doing the first innovation things. They were doing collaboration things with a lot of people around the world, with other different schools, doing collaborative projects, using a lot of technologies. And the majority of them, step by step, they discovered that one classroom in a school is not an innovation thing, it's just an anecdote. And if they really want to change the experience of learning for their students, if they want to really make the real change for the life of their students and their communities, because the schools are not just for students, are the community centers of development. So if they want to make this, they needed to think in schools. They needed to think in how to change their schools organization from the organization level. So there is a situation that I have seen this year, 2017. I have seen that the majority, most of our friends from a decade ago that were innovative teachers, now are innovative head teachers. They are principals in their schools, because they needed to make the change bigger. Even if they can forget to use the last thing or to make the most innovative, but they need to be together with their colleagues. They need to be, the school must change if they want to change the experience of learning for their students. And this framework or a framework like this is thinking on this perspective. The unit of change is not the school, is not the teacher. The teacher is crucial, the teacher is very important, the classroom is basic, my classroom is my kingdom. But the key level of change, of innovation for schools, are schools. Schools as community, as people that work together. And no one in the community, no one in the school can avoid to get this role, this participant role, this important role in their change or on their organization.
And I guess it's not only about changing school organization, but also about being aware or raise awareness somehow of the fact that technology does not serve all the purposes. So we don't say to teachers, you have to use technology in your classroom. No, if you don't have a purpose behind, so if you don't have the pedagogical thinking behind, then it's useless to use technology. And sometimes I think that teachers are forced, like Fernando was mentioning with the bank example, are forced to use technology and they just don't know how to use it, or they don't find the pedagogical thinking behind, I think.
But if you're thinking technology just only just as a device that you have to use in schools, this is a very big problem. When you must use a device in your school, but you are definitely forced to use technology in your classroom. And this is not bad, it's the life. Life is with technology. The problem is when you are forced to use a device, a precise device. But take care, technology is not just the device. Technology is behind the thinking of our students. Our students are in a world that is changing the way of thinking, they're changing the way of getting information. Their personal learning environments are completely different now than before, and these are impacted on technology. Technology is impacting on them. So, and it's about devices that is crucial, and it's about the thinking on the purpose and the way of thinking our students and so on.
For me, I work in a faculty of education, so I help teachers to become teachers. And for me, using technology on many occasions implies simply helping them discover the potentialities of technology. Let me give you an example. This morning, we have been working around a song titled Perfect, and we have been using Spotify to listen to the song. We have been using SoundHound to have a look at the lyrics. We have been using a word processor to create a rhyme from the song. And my final question was, have you ever used Spotify or SoundHound to improve your English or to improve your communicative linguistic competences? And it's true that on many occasions schools were invited to use a specific piece of hardware, but I think that many teachers have made a real effort to give sense to that invitation. Obviously, many teachers feel the pressure of having spent thousands of euros into pieces of equipment which were not planned, and they didn't have a project for those for that hardware and software. But no one had, but they have been able to make sense out of it. The problem is that considering what Linda has just mentioned, I really feel that even though the framework is normally presented as a circle, there are two related aspects of the framework, which for me are really the key, the cornerstone of the framework, which are leadership and governance. We've been talking about how those Sherpas, how those innovative teachers have become principals in their schools and high schools, and I really feel that they have felt that if you do not take a grip into leadership and try to provoke sometimes or to promote on other occasions that change, it doesn't happen because the administration simply publishes a new order or some new instructions. I really think that the framework has a clear starting point, which is leadership. And in a modern sense, obviously. Distributed leadership, leadership to provoke a systemic change, systemic transformation, leadership which is leadership for education and leadership for learning, and not just for management. It's not just a sort a type of leadership which is worried about common everyday tasks. It is a transformational leadership. I really feel that our focus must be on leadership and how that leadership is put into practice, which is what we normally call governance.
Yeah.
And from that moment, when the school accepts its own leadership, things start happening, and transformation is possible, I'm afraid.
I totally agree with you, but
okay, I love your bats.
Granted, my English friend said, granted, nonetheless. But no, apart from leadership definitely is a key is crucial thing, and also the role, the responsible thinking of teachers of their own role, even if they don't have the perspective of being the leadership part of the leadership of the school. If they don't have this role, or they don't feel they are part of this leadership equipment or the leadership team in a school, if anybody in this can see this framework critically and try to localize themselves on this framework, they can see what is their own responsibility and how connected is the responsibility, my responsibility that historically has been with my students and my class in my things, and how this responsibility is changing right now in a different thing. Now, I'm not responsible just from my classroom, my students, and my teaching things, but also my organization is also part of my responsibility. And I can being or not being part of the leadership team. But even if I'm not the leadership team, I have a big responsibility on it.
Just give me just
yes,
one single second. There is no although, no however, no bad. I agree with you. The problem is that we as teachers have always been part of the organization. I mean, the teacher who encloses himself or herself in the classroom is also creating a type of organization, which is destructured, which is misorganized, which is not cooperative, which is individualistic in the best sense, which may be competitive. Now, I am the science teacher, and nobody teaches better than me. And so this moment in which we have become aware of the importance of thinking globally in terms of the whole school, this moment in which, for example, we accept that we need whole school projects for everything. The curriculum is not divided into blocks. The curriculum is a whole school approach to knowledge and to ways of teaching. So this moment is when leadership is effective. When teachers do not have this global way of thinking in an educational context, we have an inefficient type of leadership.
Indeed.
In the sense that teachers were not cooperating with the evolution, with the life of their school, thinking that their role or their task is just teaching their subject matters hidden into their classrooms. They are provoking an inefficient type of organization.
Definitely.
And I think that the framework is also, well, calling our attention to that type of inefficient type of organization
Precisely.
through poor types of leadership. And I think that's a good point. It's a good call for us. It's not bad to know that either way we are provoking different types of leaderships, which are inefficient or efficient, depending on our own implication on the whole school.
Definitely. Precisely.
You're talking about leadership, both of you. So I want to take this advantage to introduce the next question. And so you know the framework offers 7 different elements. So 3 focus on pedagogy and 3 related to organizational issues, and the last one refers to the technology part, so technology instead. So what do you think these elements have been organized in 2 different areas instead of 3?
Instead of 3, well, when we decided to do the organization of the MOOC, organization of the course,
yes, because you were involved, if I'm not mistaken.
We tried to think in how a teacher in the reality think on their school, and the technology is a question that is transversal to everything. We think on technology as a transversal thing, trying to speak again of technology as a single thing that is differentiated of everything. If we see the whole framework is around many areas, precisely about the organizational things and the pedagogical things that are in the same thing, but more or less the organization and the didactics is more close to the reality. And in the middle is technology. That technology is affecting everything. So working in technology as a different thing, apart from these 2, I think it's not thinking in the transversal of this part. So I think we decided to do this understanding that the 3rd part, that is technology, is included in everything and must be included in everything as a crucial part of every part. I think if I'm not wrong, I think that was our rationale for doing this.
No. I think you're not wrong. There was a rationale behind it. So
because you were, if I'm not mistaken, you were involved in the group proposal of the framework, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And obviously I agree with Linda. I think technology is pervasive. It is everywhere, is transversal, is operational both in organizational and pedagogical sense. So for us to make a distinction was not coherent. In fact, is not coherent with all the speech or debate we are having. We are not talking about technology as the 3rd leg of this chair we are making. It's pervasive. You can contemplate technology as a hinge in between organization and pedagogy. You can bet for in a school, technology could be, and is in many different schools an instrumental part, a basic part for the maintenance and development both of the organizational aspects and the pedagogical aspects of our core of our work. So for us it was more logical to make these 2 element organization or 2 element distinction instead of 3. And I hope many teachers will coincide with us, and then we will have to talk to the authors of the framework if they agree
with us
with us on that or no. But well, it's just a decision when you are preparing the design of an instructional device as a MOOC. It's not we have to make this special organization of the framework, but perhaps the best thing to do is to assume the framework as a flexible device, as a flexible instrument for us to reflect on, for us to design our own organizations, for us to criticize our own organizations, or to criticize the administration's role on it. And that's what we have done, to think of the framework as a flexible and multifaceted and complex way of approaching technology in educational contexts.
Actually, if you want to make the framework yours, if you want to use any framework, our rationale when we design this course, we think in how this would be connected with the reality of the education of the training of teachers. When a teacher goes through this kind of frameworks, they need to understand what is happening there, and you need to get critically on this and understanding what is behind and trying to make it close to you. And for us and for our teachers, is definitely technology is not the question. Even if everybody is speaking about technology everywhere, the most important thing for our teachers, the most important teaching for us, are the things about what happens in our class and what happens in our organization. And if we are going to work in a framework for organizing our organizations in a digital competent way, we have to think in these two things that are the most important thing for us in our day-to-day life. It's not about the abstract things about technology that are full of artificiality in our reality. So for us, it's very, very important to be critical to get a good approach to these kind of things. Right? I can hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. I was saying that, what do you think should be the first element of the framework that then a school should take into account first, according to you? Do you think that it will make sense, or it would be feasible to approach all the elements of the framework at the same time, or just one by one?
I'm afraid I have already answered some way that question. For me, the cornerstone, as I mentioned before, is leadership and governance practices.
You would go for that first, then?
Yeah, I would go for that, in the sense that they can provoke that the awareness that we need to start making the wheel go round. Assuming that the framework has this circle style, the wheel goes round once leadership and governance practices realize that technology and organization and education can work well together. And I would go for that. I would vote for leadership and governance.
And
yeah.
Linda, what about you?
I can say the same. No, well, but I would say yes, definitely. Leadership is a good corner, it's a good part. And if there is another good part that is in our hands, because there are other parts that are not in our hands, that is just organize whatever we have, that is structure, for example. But there is another very important thing that is related to the organization, that is collaboration and networking. Because they are if we can get a good leadership style, and as we have said previously, and a good collaboration and a good feeling of collaboration and a good map of what is my role inside the organization and what is the role of the other participants in the organization, and can we get or add something and value for this organization is very crucial for this change. So for this framework, I think leadership is definitely the key corner, and the other key corner is collaboration and networking. Because even if we have a good leadership, but we don't have a good collaboration strategy, it's quite difficult to get it.
Indeed.
Anyway, I presume both of us, or the three of us, sorry, would agree on the fact that the important thing is not one factor, one element, but we could say the interplay of all the elements. I mean,
Definitely.
Leadership can or may or should provoke that cooperation, that that collaboration that Linda was talking about, and that collaboration and networking should deal with content and curricula, and assessment is included into curricula. And in order to provide for that new approach to content and curricula, you must logically consider, on the one hand, your own professional development, and you must have a critical look, a critical analysis, a serious professional critical analysis of your own teaching and learning practices. And then on the other hand, you need to have a critical analysis of your infrastructures. So it's a good question to consider which is the cornerstone of the whole wheel of elements in the framework. It's a good point to start with, but I think we could reinforce the idea that the framework is powerful because of the interplay of all the factors, and they are all related. One of them is helping the other provoke transformation, provoke efficiency, provoke satisfaction. When you don't have adequate infrastructure, you feel frustrated, and that frustration somehow impels you not to change your teaching practices, because you say, okay, I will do nothing different from what I've been doing for these 10 years, because you are not changing the infrastructure so that I can connect in the internet. So the key word is not one of the elements. The key word may be interplay of all the elements and all the factors, perhaps, I think.
Understand the globality and the interconnection of everything. Understanding the systematic character of this kind of frameworks is a will, because you have to make a good picture for doing it. It's easy to remember, but it's not a will. It's much more complex than a will.
That's it.
I want to ask a last question. So the framework is open to the inclusion of new specific elements depending on the type of educational institution. And since you're university teachers, and according to you, what do you think are the elements that should be included in the framework in order to meet the needs of the universities of higher education?
That's a good question. Sure, that's a good question. Well, let me say, it's my opinion that the framework satisfies in a generic way the expectations one may have from the university. I mean, I could use the framework at university. However, I think that at university we should be deeply concerned with a concept I'm thinking of these days, and that's the concept of agency. I am tired of university students being patient receivers of wisdom from their professors and lecturers, and in the 21st century university, students will have to be agents of their own learning, because as in, can you remember the X-Files series? Knowledge is out there. So students must be agents of their own learning. Students must be agents of their own future career. So we will have to talk about entrepreneurship. We'll have to talk about, so agency for me is a very important concept, and perhaps we could include this reflection of agency concerning university lecturers and university students, and we could develop the framework in that sense. For example, assuming that for me the framework is correct for educational, higher education organizations. What's your opinion, Lindy? I'm curious about that.
From my point of view, well, from my point of view, this framework is a very generic framework. When you speak about educational institutions in this general big perspective that this approach, you can almost fit in everything, because you have created a framework for everything, and everything has a lot of differences between them, not just in context, but just in what is the purpose of education. And when you change the purpose of education, the entire framework can change. But apart from that, you can use it for the majority of the things. When I think in higher educational institutions, we have a nature as a higher educational institutions. We have two things that are not included on this framework explicitly, and I think they are very, very important for education, for universities. And it's research, first of all, and the research and the nature of teachers at the university. We are not just teachers; we are teachers and researchers. And as teachers and as researchers, the problematic environment of research in the digital era is completely complex and different, and it's another. We can make another wheel in the top of this or behind this or whatever it is, but it's another completely different wheel for thinking about digital scholarships and digital science and so on and so on and so on. And in addition, universities in their roots have the social development in terms of scientific and social development as the social compromise of the universities, and this is not included on this. Indeed, is included in a shy way for the other kind of institutions, as schools and higher education and secondary schools, but for the university is not included at all, almost. So in this piece of cake, in this red piece of cake, we have to include all the things related to research that are very complex and very important for us, and that are directly related with the leadership, with the teaching, with the professional development, with the assessment, with the content curriculum, and with the assessment not just for students, for programs of education and for the institution itself, but also for the assessment and promotion of professionals. So it's quite difficult. This is research, and then on the other hand is also the social role of the university. And for managing the social role of the university and being a digitally competent social comprometido, engaged higher educational institution, we must think in many things and many other things that have to be included on this framework for understanding universities as a digital institutions.
Great, thank you. That was a very nice answer.
Thank you very much.
I have been checking the chat in case there were some questions, but we don't have more. So maybe we can then up here if you want. So it has been really nice. Thank you very much. It has been really interesting having you on the other side talking about this, about the framework and everything that we should do or we should change in order to make our schools trying to be more digitally competent. So we have talked about, just to summarize a bit, of technology as a transversal element. So I was taking some notes not to miss anything, an important thing. So it's the importance of using technology as a transversal element rather than an independent element. Also, you mentioned leadership as a, let's say, first element to take into account in order to push the others, let's say. And well, in general, many interesting things. So just wanted to say thank you very much, Linda and Fernando, for this very nice presentation. It has been really interesting.
It has been very interesting to chat with you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Sure. It was a pleasure, and I hope we finished talking about the university. Well, I hope university researchers will get to use the framework and start making research with it. That will be good. to
read
great about the framework beyond the papers that the institutions that are providing us with the framework themselves. So let's take the framework, let's carry it to the university, and let's make research at schools and at university, and then we will be able to talk in proper terms. So let's go for that, Linda.
Oh, let's go
Linda,
for that, Fernando.
You all have some work to do.
Many.
Okay.
No. You are in the core of the European Union. So this is the way for. This is the place for moving many things. So you're in the perfect place.
Okay, so you're invited to come here and help me out
whenever you want.
Okay, I didn't want to finish without mentioning that tomorrow there will be another webinar in the MOOC with Pan Campilis. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but okay, from the Joint Research Center in Seville, where we will discuss about the selfie tool that, as you probably know, some of you probably know, it's a self-assessment tool that the European Commission is developing at the moment, and that will allow schools and educational organizations to understand their digital competence better, and also to understand or to learn how to better self-regulate their skills and competencies. So if you're interested in joining, it would be in Spanish, but I'm sure many people could be interested in this, and you can join us also at 8 tomorrow. It will be tomorrow at Central European Time, and you will find the link in the same in the MOOC, in the course section of the MOOC. And I think that was everything from my side. I wanted to point out just thank you very much again, Linda and Fernando. It has been really, really nice to have you here. And for the rest of the audience, just stay tuned to social media channels, Facebook group, the Telegram channel that we also have, where we publish also some extra resources for the MOOC, and also in Twitter with the hashtag #teach.com.org for any update related to the course. Just want to say again, thank you, Fernando. Lina, I will give you the last word to say goodbye.
Thank you very much for everything, Nair, and hope to see you soon, and enjoy the night. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both, Linda and Nair, and thank you to our friends, Jesus and Maria, and all the people who make this possible, these hangouts. We are the three to come out on the screen, but there are many people
behind the cameras
on our social media team, and so thanks also to them, and kisses and hugs to you all. I hope we'll meet together quite soon. Okay?
Hope to see you soon. Thank you very much again, and thank you everybody for joining today. Bye bye.